The Galactic Council had made their position abundantly clear. Humans were not to interact with Ravkan cubs under any circumstances. The species was apex predation incarnate 4-meter-tall adults with obsidian exoskeletons, razor-sharp mandibles, and a hunting instinct so refined that 3 Ravkan warriors could decimate an entire battalion. Their young were considered only marginally less dangerous, protected fiercely by parents who had toppled governments for lesser offenses. Elena Wood had never been particularly good at following rules. The diplomatic expedition to Ravkan Prime was supposed to be straightforward. Humanity's newest ambassador would tour the crystalline cities, smile at the appropriate moments, and sign trade agreements that would secure rare minerals for Earth's expanding fleet. Elena had prepared for formal dinners, translator malfunctions, and even the occasional cultural faux pas. She had not prepared for the small, chittering creature that had somehow escaped its enclosure in the civic gardens. The cub was barely a meter tall, its exoskeleton still soft and mottled gray rather than the glossy black of adulthood. It moved with the uncoordinated enthusiasm of youth, 6 legs scrambling over the bioluminescent flowers that lined the garden path. Elena had been admiring the way the plants pulsed in response to movement when she felt the tug. The cub had latched onto her sleeve with surprising strength, its developing mandibles catching in the fabric of her diplomatic jacket. Around her, the Ravkan escorts froze. Their translator devices emitted panicked clicks and whistles that needed no interpretation. In the distance, a thunderous roar shook the crystalline structures, the cub's parent, responding to its offspring's distress call. Elena looked down at the small creature clinging to her arm. Its multiple eyes blinked up at her in what she recognized, after years of studying xenobiology, as curiosity rather than aggression. The cub was exploring, not attacking. It had probably never encountered fabric before, certainly nothing with the strange texture of human synthetic weave. The logical response would have been to freeze, to call for help, to let the Ravkan handlers carefully extract the cub before its parent arrived and decided that the human diplomat had threatened its offspring. Galactic protocol demanded caution, restraint, absolute stillness in the face of potential predator aggression. Elena smiled and pulled back. She tugged again, gentle but firm, initiating what any human who had ever owned a puppy would recognize instantly. Play. The cub's chittering changed pitch, becoming higher, more excited. It yanked enthusiastically, and Elena let it pull her forward a step before pulling back again. The creature's rear legs performed what could only be described as a delighted hop. Its mandibles released her sleeve only to grab it again, and Elena laughed a sound that made several Ravkan guards flinch and reach for their sidearms. "Ambassador Ward," her human security chief's voice cracked through her earpiece. "The parent is approaching. 60 seconds. "I see it," Elena murmured, not breaking eye contact with the cub. Because she could see it now, a massive shadow moving through the crystalline structures with predatory grace, each footfall causing the ground to vibrate subtly. 30 seconds. The cub tugged harder, and Elena tugged back, then suddenly released the tension. The cub tumbled backward, legs flailing comically, then scrambled upright and launched itself at her sleeve again with renewed enthusiasm. 20 seconds. The parent Ravkan emerged into the garden proper, and Elena's escorts scattered like leaves before a storm. The creature was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure, obsidian armor gleaming, mandibles that could shear through starship hull plating clicking in what every instinct screamed was aggressive intent. 10 seconds. Elena gave the cub one final gentle tug, then carefully extracted her sleeve from its mandibles. The cub chittered in what sounded suspiciously like disappointment. 5 seconds. Elena straightened, turned to face the approaching parent, and did something that would later be studied in xenopsychology courses across a dozen systems. She smiled, held up her hands in a universal gesture of non-threat, and slowly knelt down to the cub's level. Then the parent Ravkin made a sound Elena had never heard in any of her xenobiology briefings, a low, rumbling series of clicks that her translator struggled with before settling on a word that seemed inadequate. Amusement. The parent lowered itself slightly, bringing its massive head closer to human eye level. When it spoke, the translator rendered its deep, resonant voice with surprising clarity. Your species plays with predators. It wasn't a question. Elena kept her smile steady, kept her hands visible, kept her posture relaxed, despite every human instinct screaming at her to run from the apex predator less than an arm's length away. We used to be predators ourselves, she said quietly. Before that, we were prey. We learned that the line between the two isn't as clear as most species think. And we learned that sometimes play is how you teach that lesson. The parent Ravkin's eyes fixed on her with an intensity that felt like standing before a scanner that could read souls. Then, slowly, deliberately, it extended one massive claw and gently, impossibly gently tapped the cub on its soft exoskeleton. The cub released Elena's sleeve and scurried to its parent, chittering excitedly about its new discovery. The council said humans were unsuitable for contact with our young, the Ravkin said. They said you were soft, fragile, that you would react with fear or aggression. Elena stood slowly, brushing off her knees. Her diplomatic jacket was torn, her security team was having collective heart attacks, and somewhere an incident report was already being drafted that would make this the most documented first contact protocol violation in human history. She was still smiling. The council, she said, has never raised a puppy. The parent Ravkin's mandibles clicked in what the translator insisted was laughter. It turned to leave, the cub following on unsteady legs, then paused. The trade agreements your council seeks, we will approve them. Not for the minerals. Not for the strategic advantage. Those burning eyes fixed on Elena one last time. But because any species that plays with predator cubs might actually be interesting enough to know, as they disappeared into the crystalline structures, Elena's security chief finally reached her, face pale, already launching into what would undoubtedly be a very long lecture about protocols and safety and diplomatic incident reports. Elena just smiled and examined her torn sleeve, where the marks of small mandibles had left an imperfect but undeniable pattern. Sometimes chaos wasn't something to avoid. Sometimes it was just another kind of play. And humanity, as always, knew how to play.